bridge. So when I wrote the bridge, I wanted it to be not so angular like the other, it's more smooth, you know? That was nice. Because I thought, and he's like, no, let's put it down together. So, anyway, if you want to check out the record, it's on the thing. But well, the thing that's cool about that is that something I learned, and this is probably the biggest lesson I got off the record, is that when we did the rehearsals, when I played the songs, like we would rehearse, and I would go right into the grooves. And Clarence at the end pulls me aside and goes, man, I don't know who you're listening to, but you don't gotta be the drummer all the time. You don't gotta play the groove right away. Let things build, let things shape. Think more about shaping things. Think more about building with the soloist. You don't have to go, no, because I don't know who you're playing with. Because the thing is, and that comes from this theater world, it's always like, oh, we gotta groove right away, we gotta play for the act, He was like, we're not doing that. Everyone's time is good enough that you don't have to necessarily keep time. You can think more color, think more just building and maybe emotions, right? So like that's like so like so like we get to like it seems to go away.
Yeah, I think it's on its last leg, battery wise. Let me get
okay. Oh yeah, it does. It was there for a minute. Sorry, man.
That's all right.
Okay. So remember the thing I started with, I said, when you play music, focus on the you. I think the thing that's really amazing about this record, for me, is that, Luis Perdomo's on piano. Do you guys know Luis Perdomo? You ever heard of a saxophone player named Miguel Zanon? No? Alto player? Oh man, he's like the cat now. Anyway, you want to check out some really great writing. Check out his writing. And actually, when I did the record, the thing that I was checking out the most was like Miguel's music, because he writes a lot of Latin rhythms, but it's very open. So like he'll do like a thing in 9, like like it's like really interesting the way he plays these rhythms, and then Henry Cole will just do his thing, and Miguel's writing is like incredible. So anyway, check him out if you're interested. But these guys they were able to do their thing, but they also make me sound good too. And I think this is why I love this take so much. Why this is my favorite part of the whole record, even though it didn't make the record. It's just like, sometimes you play with people and there's just like this unspoken communication that's like, wow. So let me show you the end of the song. So here's the second part. So this is like, so we just arrived to our destination. Let's come to the speaker. This is all the record. Now we can play around with it. I'm doing all these skills to regard this time. Every time you try to do my thing, but then also there's music. like one of the this next section. They started doing happen at the same time. I was like, oh my God! Now the thing about that is we were in two different rooms. We had no sightline. We were just listening to each other, right? So I'm just like playing and like we're just feeding off the energy that's like happening. And I was like, I couldn't believe that happened. So anyway, that didn't make the record, but that's like my favorite moment of the whole session. Yes, sir?
Why didn't it make the record if you liked it so much?
Because we wanted to make it radio friendly. So, so it was like, but I always put it at the end of my YouTube stuff. I put that, if I'm doing like, have like the end credits, whatever, or YouTube, I always put that somewhere. Do you have a question, Sam?
I was going to ask, in terms of writing in odd meters, do you put yourself in a box and say, okay, I am going to write something in 7, or does something in an odd meter come to you, and that's the genesis of the composition? So that,
okay.
Because I'm not a composer, so that's always fascinated me that
yeah.
when you listen to like Radiohead and stuff like that.
Well, it's funny you mention that.
Hey,
it's funny you mention that. Because I have a song that's everything in its right place, but it's in 7. It's called Misinformation, and it's just that same progression of, and I just started as like just trying to retain, like do the thing where like, exercise like retaining the common tone. Right, but then the groove just came. Came in 7. The other one in 7. A lot of times they just start as like grooves. So like this was like more like a Chopin thing. It's called Quarantine. So I wrote it obviously during the pandemic, and it just. And I just like that. But that's like, a lot of the stuff comes from like just, I'm gonna play in 7 and I want it to sound a certain, like I wasn't thinking, this is gonna be 7, more so as I wanted to write something with a lyrical melody that sounded like, because as a kid, I played a lot of Chopin. But as a kid, I used to play that all the time, and I just wanted something that sounded like that. Sound like kind of like a figured bass thing. Because I'm not a good, like I can't write a bebop head if my life depended on it, But so like another thing that I did was I challenged myself. All right, I want to write something that sounds like a fugue, like a Bach thing, but in 5. So I came up with this idea that's like this. And it has like that, and then it grooves just, the groove is the chord is just, it's like. kind of like a Bach 25, you know. And then, you know, and then it's a question of like, if, okay, we're gonna play in 5, and we establish the groove in 5, but then what can we do with it, right? You know, and a lot of it, I can't remember, like, I wish I could remember more of my composition stuff. But one thing that I checked out in one of my songs was like modulation. I don't know, this is like not a popular movie anymore, but Blazing Saddles. There is a, in the song, there's this amazing modulation where they go from one key to the other. And the singer's like, oh, and he goes to this other key. And I remember like sitting going, I gotta figure that out. And I remember figuring out, and I was like, I'm gonna put that on the record. So in the song Figuerella, there's a modulation, you know, key-wise, where I kind of, you know, he does like one of those kind of things. And it's like, you know, and then it's like, establishes this new key, and it's like, whoa, that was so weird. Probably the Neapolitan 6 is probably what they use. But it was like so interesting musically. I was like, I gotta use that, you know. So a lot of my composition stuff came from those little things, you know, like just like playing Chopin as a kid, you know. So how do I, you know, because the other thing too is when I wrote odd time signatures stuff, I was like, okay, it's gonna be at 7, but I don't want it to be like, where's 1? A lot of stuff like you listen to in odd time signatures is like, oh, it's very complicated, but it's like, I don't know what's happening. I want it to be accessible, right? So, so there's another song that I wrote. You guys ever check out like Avishai Cohen, the piano player trio? No? Okay. Well, there was a band like with Avishai Cohen's a bass player, and he writes a lot of like sort of Israeli. I want to say it's almost like Israeli folk music in a way, but it's very odd time signatures, and they go all these different places with it. Mark Giuliano's the drummer. Do you know Mark Giuliano? Have you ever heard of him? Yeah. Okay, I'm old. Mark Giuliano's an incredible musician. He's married to this singer named Gretchen Parlato, and he's got a really unique sound on the drums. And every time I hear him, it's just like so inspiring. But anyway, this trio is Avishai Cohen, this piano player Shai Maestro. He's Israeli, I think, as well, and Mark Giuliano.
This is where you write all these names down, children. You see, Brick is writing everything down because he's studious.
Text yourself, yes.
Yes.
Anyway, so there's a record live in Seattle, Avishai Cohen trio live in Seattle, which is like really cool. And there's a lot of stuff. It's like the melodies are like. But then they like take it to these other places, other worlds. So I was like, man, I want to write something like that. So my last song on my record is called Rosetta Stone, and it's in 9. But what I wanted to do is take the 8th note and displace it. So the groove is like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Boom, boom, da, 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 da. So it's like 1, 2, 3, 3, and 8, 9, 1, 2, 3, 3, and 8, 9, right? Because I was, you know, Clarence and I were talking about 9, and 9 is a really interesting meter to write in because you could do it like 4.5 and split it in 2. You could do it in 3. You could have 3 groups of 3. You could do 6. So what I did with this one was, I don't know if I can play it because I had to figure this out, but so the melody. Like doing that, and the bass going. And then what happens is I play like sort of like a. Okay, so now I've got this groove, right, in my head. How do I play it on the drums? What am I going to play? So I was like, well, Mark Giuliano, what would Mark Giuliano play? So I was thinking, because he has a song, Obviously I Call Trio has one song, it's like, dun, dun, dun. I think it's at 6. You know, so I was like, what if I do this? Play with that, you know. I was trying to, like, Mark Giuliano would play something like that, and he might play something like. And maybe he'll do like, he puts a backbeat on it. So it's like. Part of that was like that's probably the only thing that's like become the most confusing song in the world, because people are like, where's it gonna be, you know? Because also like I'm not one of these guys who has like tons of gospel chops or any of that kind of stuff. So I was like, I got to figure out what I can say in my current, you know, what I can play and still sound good without going, you know, not gonna blow anybody's away with us blazing single strokes or anything. So what can I do what do I bring to the table? You know, that's kind of a thing that, you know, I try to ask myself. You know, because I've also done so much theater stuff, you know, that you know, that's what I bring to the table with theater stuff is a lot of like intangible stuff. You know, I try to be cool in the room. I try to like play the show as best I can. I think also, you know, people don't say, be consistent as a player, but also as a person. So like, if you're someone that's like, you gotta go to work every day, right? You gotta see these people every day. So try to be as consistent as you can. Just be like kind. Hey, how's it going? Good, great. You know, great. You know, if you're like a person that's like a hothead and you're like getting mad, people are gonna feel uncomfortable next time you come in the room. You know, you wanna be consistent about how you treat people. You know. I don't know. Any other questions like you guys want to ask about anything we've covered? Yes, sir.
I had a question about your role as a drummer, because you talked a lot about listening to others and kind of finding your place in the band. But there have been times where teachers have told me that you need to be like solid in your position, even if someone messes up or goes in a completely different direction.
Yeah,
What's your thoughts on that?
I think, you know, when you really know the music, you actually shine when everything's going wrong. For example, but the thing is, experience is what teaches you that. Okay. What I say is this. For example, we were opening Wicked in Las Vegas, right? And we had this bass player that made all the rehearsals. We don't know what the hell happened to this guy. But he flaked on the actual performance. So we had to play the first act of Wicked, opening in Vegas, a conductor's like first show in a new city, new conductor, right? What do you do? What do you think I did? What do you think I did?
Well,
if the bass player didn't show up.
Well, that's tricky. In my head, I want to tell you that I would do my best to fill his shoes, but in what way can a drummer do that?
Well, what sounds would do?
Well, I would guess the kick, just like all the lower register.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So like maybe Wizard and I. You guys know Wizard and I?
Mhm.
So the groove of that is just. Right? So maybe just play the kick a little louder. Maybe put the head of the leader more into the drum so it gives it a punch. Because my thing is also this. Anyone can play the gig when it's going right. But what happens when it goes wrong and things go off the rails? Right? You gotta still be like, you still got, as a drummer, you're sort of, you know what your role is as a drummer? You're the second in command. The conductor is like the thing that makes everything go. They're the start button, but you're the engine, right? You make everything go. Keyboard players too. Drums and keyboard, and especially the way they write these books now, wow. Like so much stuff is in the piano book. So much, like the harmony. A lot of times you're just playing the rehearsal, the PV on the piano. You know, if you're playing like a song, you know, a lot of stuff is like, you know, ragtime. Yeah, the bass and drums are doing it too. But like, if you're the one, especially, you know, even in this Millions show, we have this guy Greg Madison. You guys know Greg? Have you heard of him? He's incredible. He's playing all these like he's playing all these 16 notes in the piano. A lot of it's just him. You know, there's this song called Lemon Sucker, which is like 5/8, and it's like ding 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 5/8 going to 2/4, blah blah blah. If he doesn't have that together, he's not grooving it. When we come in, we're gonna sound terrible too. You know, but he sounds great. You know, and it's a lot of it too is also, you know what also? I would say this is something. It's kind of, the older I get, it makes more sense, but the more you know it, the more you know the song or a show, the more relaxed you're going to play, and the better it's going to sound, right? If you're really prepared, because the thing is sometimes it's not, you might be relaxed physically, but then your mind starts getting anxious, and then you start tightening up, right? But like if you prepare enough, you know, someone made a great thing. Don't prepare enough so you know it. Prepare it so much that you can't possibly mess it up. That's like next level, you know. You know, especially if you're gonna like, let's say Sam calls you to play in City Springs to sub for somebody, right? Someone had a problem. Hey Brick, man, you available? We need you to come and like do this show like next week because this guy's got a conflict. You know, okay, well, you gotta like know like how to prepare that. Right? That's another thing too. Like, you got to learn how to learn. You know, your guys. This is why you're here, right? This is why you're in school. You got to learn how to learn. If that makes any sense. I don't know if that how to describe that. Do you have anything, Gene, about that? Learning how to learn.
No, that's great.
You know, what about you, Sam? Or?
Well, I think as we move through the world as it is, you know, the world has gotten smaller and smaller every year, and it gets exponentially smaller every year, which means we have exponentially more distractions, and now we are at people's beck and call, and it's not, they don't care that you have something else to do. If they text you, you need to return that text.
Right.
So my point being in all this is that there are so many non-musical things that you have to take care of throughout the day because it's just expected of you, which means that practice time becomes a very hot commodity, and in that practice time you have to be as efficient and as effective as possible. So when I first started teaching at the collegiate level, you know, we would tell our students, you got to put 6-8 hours a day in every single day.
Yeah.
We don't do that anymore because it's not a possibility. You know, 2 to 3. But in those 2 to 3 hours, you have to get done what you would have gotten done in those 6 to 8 hours, which means you're cutting out all the fat and you're focusing specifically on a very set regime that you've made for yourself every single day. You have 4 categories and you obey those categories and just keep your head down and really be as efficient as possible. And for something like, you know, with Greg, you know, he's a drummer. So it's not like he's got a drum kit in his hotel room. And if he did have a drum kit in his hotel room, they'd throw him out. So again, we've got to come up with creative ways to practice. Sometimes it's practicing with your mind. You know, if you don't have access to your axe, you can still practice. So you've really got to become creative in the ways that you're able to get this efficient practicing done. The only thing I can tell you is it has to be daily. You can't skip a day. And so,
Yeah, that's part of the consistency.
yeah, if you start skipping days, you're gonna start having plateaus in your development. And it's much better to have a a lower angle of upward development than these steep angles and then a long time of a plateau, because that is a buzzkill. There's nothing worse than not feeling like you've gotten better the next day. So that, to me, learning how to learn is learning how to really effectively manage your time and really be effectively efficient in your practice.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say like the way to really be efficient, the most efficient probably, is to start in your weaknesses. Make your weaknesses your strengths. You know, if you need to create an exercise to work on your deficiencies, do it, because the stronger your deficiencies are, the better player you're going to be overall. You know, like for example, as a drummer, one thing that I didn't realize until recently that I had a real issue with playing doubles in the foot and maybe keeping a single on a really like, you know, so if you're starting a double and you have to finish with a single, you got to really make sure that's together. I'm sitting a little high, so it's not quite together, but it's close. But that's the kind of stuff that I try to work on every day. You know, like. If I'm doing a fill and I'm going to lead with the foot, you know, I'm going to try to make an exercise where I'm not just playing on the snare drum, but maybe start moving around the drum set, you know. Just little things like that, because nothing happens just once. Everything happens multiple times. You know, anything that you run into once, you're probably going to run into it again. So you might as well just nip it in the bud, you know. If I'm starting a show, like for example, when we talked about, we started the whole thing with the money train, right? Just having to go like. That took forever for me, because that was really hard for me. And then it's like, oh, now I gotta open the hi-hat too? Oh my God. That was a muscle memory thing, but you know, no. You know, now it's so much better. Now I can do it like in my sleep. But I also put in the work. You know what I mean? There's another groove in the show called Lemon Sucker. It's like 5, and initially, it's just something you would never play as a drummer. So it was like, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like a Vinny thing where you're playing like over the bar line. That's the way it started on the demo. And I was like, okay. It's not that anymore, that's why I can't do it anymore. Now it's this. But then when I got the demo, the second demo, the orchestra descent, it was on the rise. It was like, I was like, all right, that's a lot of wasted motion. So what if I do left hand on the hi-hat and just keep the right here and try to go back and forth to the hands? Because it's like, so now what this groove actually is this. So I was like, a lot of it's like, okay, I had to they sent it one way, I figured out one way, and then they sent it another way, and then I was like, okay, but now this is stupid. So now, not that it's stupid, but it's just wasted a lot of motion, and I won't be able to control it. You know, and actually what's funny is that this is the first show I've done where I'm not in a box. I gotta play like real quiet. So it's like, right? So a lot of it's like the problem solving, okay, how am I gonna be able to do that? So I was able to at least approach this a couple different ways. So when I came time to rehearsal, I was like, okay, I got it. Yes, sir.
On the note of being prepared for stuff, how do you go about learning music for last minute? Like, how do you prioritize, like, the work? Like, do you like go through, find out what's
I would
hardest?
find out whatever's hardest. Work on that the most. Like if you're doing something and you're not comfortable with like a certain chord, like are you playing jazz? You talking about something?
In general.
Okay. Yeah, like if you're playing something and it's like you're having a hard time with, how last minute are we talking? A day
I'd
of?
say- Yeah, let's say like it's tomorrow.
Well, I think the easiest way, the fastest way to learn is to do everything super slow. You know, rather than waste a lot of time trying to do it at tempo where you don't really have it together. Get it slow and slowly speed it up if you can. And if you hit a plateau, you hit a plateau. But that's the best way to do it because it is muscle memory and you're training your body. That being said, if it's something else, like I'm thinking like, let's say like someone asked you to play something where you have to play a lot of lines. Or something where you're playing two hands and they're sort of doing some kind of interdependence thing. Like if, you know, if like I had to play something on the drums, you know, and it's like, okay, I gotta like figure out. It's like, you know, it's like my Bill Stewart thing. There's all this stuff where he does like, you know, he'll play like. Like he has like this thing where he plays alto and this hi-hat against like where he's playing the melody and his left hand or whatever. So like if you're doing that sort of thing on the piano, I would start with like whatever is giving you the most problem, whatever that measure is, whatever that, and then build up to the phrase and then build up, you know, everything's one note at a time. I remember the first time I went to watch Gary Slightson play Wicked. I had just come home from the Foster tour and I went to watch him play. And my mind was completely blown. Not because of what he was playing was so insanely hard, but I was so overwhelmed by how much music he had to play, right? And I remember leaving going, Gary, how would you learn this? He goes, I don't know, he just, you know, he came up with the book. So, you know, for him it was whatever. And then, lo and behold, this was 2004, so I got the gig in 2011. 7 years later, I got the gig and I had to learn it myself. And you know what the trick is? One page at a time, one measure at a time. However much you need to break it down, that's the way to do it. And just attack that stuff. Because the stuff that you already know, you don't need to practice that because you got it already. So just work on the stuff that's like, you know, unless it's like a super really tricky arrangement or whatever, and it's if it's a lot of music that's really hard, then you just got to do the best you can. You know, but also like, there's nothing wrong with being thrown in the deep end either, because sometimes that's where you learn the most. You know, one thing I didn't get to talk about was my failures, some of my failures, right? And a lot of my career was making certain choices that benefited me in the long run. For example, I got asked to play the Wicked audition in 2005. Someone was leaving the tour. They were moving to Broadway. The guy in Broadway was leaving to do another show. So I